This is Centered, where faith meets everyday life. Our hope is to invite you into a better story, a story where you're made new through Jesus, living with God-given purpose, and experiencing peace, joy, and freedom. Together, we'll explore what it means to keep Jesus at the center of where we live, work, and play, bringing beauty, meaning, and renewal to every part of our lives. Thank you for joining us. Here are your hosts, David and Ben.
Well, welcome to the Centered podcast where faith meets real life. And man, it's a good day. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Yeah, it is a good day. I feel a little bit of reluctance to be excited about spring because it's like this week looks amazing, and I'm already like ready for shorts and.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. So I don't know. It could
I've got
snow
PTSD
again.
from last week.
Yeah, that's what I'm feeling like.
I was like, can I wear short sleeves? I was scared, but I did it.
You did it. It's good.
Did it.
I'm playing tennis right after this. So
outdoor?
Yeah, outdoor tennis. So
okay.
Spring is here, baby.
Spring
is here, and I'm excited.
Yeah, love it. You know, I thought we'd open up today with just talking a little bit about like the podcast and the format. And so I three things that I wanted to share with you all, the listeners, on the format, because we are intentional about what we do on the podcast. And so one is intentionally long format, right? Like we want to talk about things.
Not to be confused with long-winded.
No.
It's long
because
format.
Everything's important. Every word we say matters. Yes. Yeah. But it's intended to like get into things that really we can't get into in a Sunday sermon, like to that level of depth.
Totally. I mean, to be honest, I think that was the main focus of why we started this. We wanted to create space where we could go deeper and we could take Sunday into Monday through Saturday and really dig into it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the first thing. Second thing, it's intentionally conversational. And I think that's really about like just being accessible, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes we can be in a sermon and we kind of nerd out.
Yeah.
And we live in the clouds and we're talking about things and not everybody's really tracking with us. And we even apologize. Like I've heard you do that a couple of times. Like, let me nerd out for a minute here.
Yeah.
You know, and we nerd out a little bit here too, but in a conversational way so that like I've talked to like young people, like high school age people who are like, oh, I like the podcast.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Because they can actually like understand and relate to it because it's conversational. Which
That's
I think
awesome.
is awesome. Yeah.
And I mean, on the other side of that too, it's, man, on Sunday morning, it's one person's opinion.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so it's just so good to have multiple voices speaking into topics and ideas. And, you know, even last week having the three of us with Paul and being able to communicate. And we'll do more of that.
Yeah,
we'll have more of those conversations with bringing other voices in and hearing other people's perspectives.
I've got people who are submitting their applications.
Yeah, they're ready.
Like, they're like, can I be your first guest? Like,
too late. We already had our first guest.
Too late for that.
Yeah.
Paul's the winner. Third thing is it's intentionally unscripted.
Yeah.
You know, like we've got a plan. Like, you know, we'll come with some things that we want to talk about, but we don't do the podcast before the podcast. We don't sit here and talk about, you say this and I'm going to say this. And like, we really just want it to be real. And so like we're reacting to each other in real time. And I think there's value in that. And just like for people to be able to see like, not what should I say? And I thought about it in advance, but like really what I actually think about this, I'm just reacting.
Yeah, someone told me they were listening and they said, I can tell you're not scripted because of the long pauses you take.
Yeah.
And so now I'm like a little self-conscious about okay, don't, because you don't really do that on Sunday morning. You know, I have things I need to hit, and I have a pace and a rhythm I need to get through the content as.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Or I caught it last week because I said something and both you and Paul were like, whoa, like you're surprised by it.
Yeah.
You know, and so, and that's intentional. Like we want to have that just real authentic conversation. Yeah. So if you were wondering, gosh, why are these guys so long formatted? It's intentional. We do it with purpose. And we hope that you're finding value in just conversations about like faith in real life. That's what this is all about. And so, yeah. So with that said, let's dig into it.
Yeah. Well, how many podcasts is this so far?
So this is, I think we're calling it episode 5, but
Episode
it's the
5.
6th one because we had that pilot.
That's right. We had the pilot. So six in. Man, thank you guys for sticking with us. We're like I think we're hitting a stride.
Yep.
And man, I'm having fun doing this. Like I look forward to this moment
Legitimately.
in the week. Like, I know Sunday night we get done and I like go home and I'm just like, man, I can't wait to unpack that or talk about that or see what Ben thinks about that or whatever. So
I literally like go home on Sundays and I start like just thinking about like, okay, what are we going to talk about? And because it's fun to interact on these things and just, hopefully in a way that's helpful and meaningful for people.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, let's hit. It's coming. Some kind of drop.
Yep,
Courtney
drop.
just told us she's working on it.
Yep.
Not this week, but maybe next week. I think we'll have something. The cutting room floor.
Room floor.
What did you not get to, man?
So much, man.
Oh,
there was so much.
We cut you off.
Oh, dude.
I could tell you were like, I'm just getting started.
So early, dude. You guys, it felt so early. Yeah, that piano started playing. I was like, I got to land the plane. And there is a lot. What's funny is I heard someone came up to me and said, hey, this is the first time someone's talked about sex at church and it wasn't Ben.
I'm affectionately known as the sex pastor.
Sex pastor.
I've been trying to keep that kind of under wraps, but it's out there now.
It's out there. Yeah. Someone literally walked up in the lobby and said, I've been here for, they named some like
5
7 years or whatever it was. And
40
it's the first
years.
time. Yeah.
And this is, and you know what's funny about that is of all the times I've talked about sex, I never once chose the topic.
It was chosen. It was given to you.
Yes, it was assigned to me. The very first sermon I gave here was about sex, and it was really just because all the other pastors on staff chickened out, and I was the new guy. Yeah. So like, what am I? I can't say no. I'm not going to say no to the first like, here's the text. I'm reading it like, you got to be kidding me, man.
Yeah, dude, and I think that, and this is a little bit has to do with the cutting room floor. I wasn't ever going to talk about this, but it was always in the back of my mind, especially when we had that Ruth Haley Barton quote that said,
was a good quote.
Yeah, man, if the church does not teach us what our bodies are for, our culture certainly will. Instead of temples of the Holy Spirit, we'll come to see our bodies primarily as a tool for meeting our needs and desires. And this wasn't a sex talk, and so we were talking about romance and the cultural idea of how Western civilization like frames romance and how the Bible talks about it and the role that it plays in our life. So that was typically it really wasn't a sex talk. It wasn't about sex, but
although I'll get us there. Don't worry.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're the sex pastor. You'll get us there. But I do think I did mention purity culture.
Yeah.
And I grew up in that in the late 80s, early 90s. That was a big part of my youth group experience. And man, I am not kidding. I know so many women that walked away from the church because they were scarred by that. And a huge part of that is I think the church often abdicates its responsibility to have the cultural conversations that are going on. Like kids are hearing about sex, they're learning about sex, they're hearing about their bodies, they're learning about their bodies from all kinds of different places except the church.
Right.
And that is, man, that's a shame. And I think it hurts people. And here's the thing, in many ways, I think it causes, because the church is silence about certain important issues, there is I call it a cultural like springback. Like I think gender right now, like what we're seeing with gender fluidity and a lot of this stuff is because I think in many ways the church has failed to teach its people and thus the world around them the beauty of our bodies and gender, and do it in a way that is actually honoring and in a way that is in mutuality of dignity. So both male and females are dignified and held up and equal in value and design and all those types of things. And so, yeah, as I was reading that quote, I was just like, man, we need to be having these conversations as a church that culture's having, and we need to frame it not in the negative, right? Not in the don't do this, don't be that, don't
Right.
like in the fear side of things, but in the beauty of God's design. Man, he's designed gender, he's designed sex, he's designed our emotions, all these types of things to have a purpose and a proper place. And yeah, if we don't teach people what those things are, the world will.
It's true. And it's I've often kind of framed it like, look, if we don't have, and this is parents, the church,
Yeah.
frame it how you want, but it is from a Christian perspective.
Right.
If we don't have these conversations with our kids, is the way I've typically framed it, but I think I would expand beyond that to like with each other.
Yeah.
Where these conversations are happening on the playground, in the locker room,
Yep.
Google, like start like Googling things about sexuality. Like, is that where you want your kids to get their worldview about sex?
Yeah. No. The answer is
no.
no.
The answer is absolutely not.
No.
It's horrifying. And so like we have a duty to have these conversations. Not that we should do it from a place of duty, but like just like, man, what a privilege, honestly, to be able to like I'm one of those weird dads. Like I loved the talk. I loved doing it. I loved like sex pastor, right? Like and so like I turned it into like a whole weekend. Like we travel, we go to, and so like for me, it's like what a privilege that I get to do something that I never received.
Yeah.
And I had to just figure things out on my own, figure things out with friends who had some pretty jacked up ideas of what sex is and isn't. And, so yeah, I think it's huge that we have these conversations because if we don't, we're going to just land somewhere and we rarely drift towards God.
Yeah. Yeah. And we ignore parts of our humanity, of the way that God designed us, or we suppress parts of our humanity, the way God designed us in ways that I don't think God ever intended. And it's out of protection that we do that. But in doing that, we're actually forcing the lie. And I give the example. I remember one time having this like visceral experience of being like, oh, I approached this conversation wrong. When my daughter came up to me and she asked, she's like, hey, if drugs are so bad, that's what she said, if drugs are so bad, and she's young, she's like 7 or 8 years old. Like, and it was just like awesome that she said this. She goes, if drugs are so bad, why do so many people do them? And I just like, like as a parent, like, and you just start talking about, and it was like, man, there's a deep question there, like if sex outside of marriage is so bad, why does it feel good? And why do people, do it? Like what, like these are all the questions that are going on in our kids or culture's mind that they've never been able to reconcile with the gospel and what Jesus calls us into. And it's because of the way we've approached Christian education, like how we've fenced in the world instead of unfence it and bring it into the realm of beauty and design and fullness and fulfillment and all those things. So yeah, I just think that that's a important thing to think about. And now I would talk about, I learned I say the phrase that, sin is oftentimes us trying to get our real needs met in wrong ways.
Yeah.
And so I've learned to start with the real need, which is what I did this weekend. I start with the real need that we have. And then we can talk about, when we identify what the real need is, it helps us to get to the real solution. But if you just start with the danger or don't do this or avoidance or whatever, and you don't really talk about the real need, then you don't even really know what you're talking about. And then you have to like suppress your feelings and emotions and shame comes in.
All those. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's really good. In fact, that was like one of the things we'll talk about it now instead of later. I was going to want to jump into, but like you've used that phrase a couple times on stage, in different sermons, just that sin is having real desires or needs met the wrong ways. And so, like, I don't know, like, I'd love to just go maybe just even like a little deeper on that, like, because I think it's framed so differently than what most of us who've been in church, grew up in church, religious circles, whatever. It's always like this, like, stay away. These desires are bad, wrong. Like, could you like what's like maybe underneath that, even like on a deeper level?
Yeah. Yeah, one is I think we oftentimes just categorize sin in morality. So it's like what's the right or wrong thing to do, and basically we come up with our own like laws, which is it's funny because the Bible doesn't the Bible doesn't give law that way.
Yeah.
It's not like what we think of, like, hey, if the speed limit's 65 miles per hour and you're going 75, you get a ticket for it doesn't frame law in a sense of rules. It always, when it talks about the law of God, it's always in a social and relational construct. And so how is this advancing social flourishing, and how is this helping to protect the relationships between neighbors and the people and family and stuff like that? And so we have a tendency to take sin and connect it to rules. And what's funny is even the 10 Commandments.
Yeah, that's where my head goes. It's
what
like,
throws us off?
That's a list of rules.
Yeah, what
do you
throws
mean?
us off is the 10.
Right.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because it doesn't do that. It's actually 11 when you like look at it, first of all. But I guess it just doesn't roll off the tongue when the 11 commandments, it just sounds weird that's there. But when you look at those are, God is boiling down the relational context that helps humans to flourish. And when you look at that, it's all relational connection. First and foremost is our relationship to God.
Yep.
Plugging into the source, right? Getting our needs met from the right place, like understanding how we're designed and what we're for and what our bodies are for and what our minds are for and what our, like who we are as humans, and locating ourselves in the right context, which is we live in God's world. And oftentimes I think the first 4 is just simply that. I just want to remind you live in God's world. Like, this isn't Ben's world. This isn't David's world. It's not for you. It's like
Bobby's world.
You're here. Yeah. This is God's world that we live in. And then the rest is, how do we live in God's world in a way that allows it to flourish? And that's the other 6 things. And it's super simple things, like, man, we live in truth, not a lie. We don't covet our neighbor's stuff, right? We are good stewards of our own stuff. We don't kill each other. Like that
seems pretty basic.
Pretty basic, yeah. It's not like just this, but it's a rule about flourishing. And what happens is we take it out of the context of the story that it's given in, and the story that it's given in is God has designed a world to be filled with abundance, not scarcity, to be filled with relational flourishing, not brokenness, to be like, that's the world that we live in. And so sin is anything that gets in the way of that. And I just don't think we think like that. I think we start with like, oh, it's like God's holding back from us. So we start with a scarcity mindset instead of an abundance mindset. And the kingdom of God is an abundance mindset. God's not holding back pleasure from us. He's actually holding back pain.
Right.
And sometimes we have to forego temporary pleasures so that we can avoid long-term pain in our lives. And so like there's a bigger picture or context in which God's design is placed into. And when we just reduce things to rules, right or wrong, then we miss the point. And
yeah, it's the difference of what God wants from you versus for you.
Totally.
Like that's how we always we frame it, as like if God gives us a list of rules, He wants us to follow the list of rules, and He's disappointed with us when we don't.
Yeah.
But if we view God instead as someone who's for us and wants for us flourishing, good things, healthy life, then he's saying this is how you get there.
Yeah.
And so when we miss that, it's not that God's disappointed in us because we didn't follow his rule.
Right.
It's like God's saddened because of the effect it's going to have on us.
Totally.
Which is a very different paradigm.
Posture,
And
paradigm.
It's that whole thing of I've said this before, I want my kids to have this view of I'm messed up. I got to go tell my dad. Instead of I've messed up, how can I hide it from my dad?
Totally.
And the same thing with God. It's how do we have that posture of I screwed up, I missed the mark, whatever. I should be going this way and I went this way, and look at my life now. I need to go to God as the source of help. Instead of we generally have this tendency, I got to run from God. I got to hide from him. I don't want to see him, as if when we do run into him, he's going to be disappointed at us, and, we're going to have this awkward conversation, just the same way we avoid people we let down.
And I think what has happened in our world right now, and I think this has been forever. I actually don't. I think it was in, Jesus's day when the Pharisees, looked down. The religious people of Jesus' day looked down on people who were morally bankrupt. They judged them, whether they're alcoholics or having sex out of wedlock, or they didn't follow the Levitical law, or whatever was happening, or they're unclean, considered unclean, or whatever was going on. They looked down on those people, and so Jesus had to come in and level the playing field and reshape our understanding of God's law and the purpose of it in the world, and why it's so important for us, in there. And we do the same thing now, and this is what makes identity politics and Christian ethics mixed together so dangerous. Because we now take people who don't hold our Christian ethic, we tie that to our political identity, and now anyone who's not aligned with our political identity and living up to our Christian ethics is now demonized. Right. Instead of seeing them as children of God, made in his image, who the gospel's for, why the gospel exists, why Jesus came to die.
By God.
Loved by God, and why the church exists.
Right.
You know what I mean? All of these things, now they become a people to oppose and come against, instead of people to serve and love and be a light, show them the heart and the design of God, and give them a better path to walk on. It's, they become enemies instead of neighbors, and that's really dangerous. It's a really dangerous thing. And all that to say is we did the same thing with the purity culture in the 80s and 90s. Sex is bad. Don't have sex. The worst thing that you could possibly do as a Christian is to have premarital sex. And we made sex a demon or a wickedness, instead of something beautiful that has a context and a purpose and something to play in people's lives. And what happened is a lot of these young Christian girls had this message, and they were the problem.
Right.
It made them the problem. And then they bring this into marriage, and marriage was supposed to be the magical fix-all to this thing, and then sex was hard. Intimacy was hard. There was barriers in it. Right. It wasn't as good or amazing as, they thought it was going to be based on how people talked about it. And they struggled in this area, and they're like, man, the very thing that was supposed to be something to be enjoyed now became something that caused pain and division, even in a marriage context. So I saw it over and over happen again. In that.
Well, no, okay. So this is good. This is something I was going to talk about later, but format. We're tossing out the format today. All right. So Jerome, the Christian father Jerome, 4th century. Okay. So for those of you that don't know, like renowned church scholar, he translated the scriptures into Latin, the Latin Vulgate.
Yep.
Deeply, intensely disciplined church father, struggled intensely with like sexual fantasy.
Yeah.
And so, couple things that were the fallout of this, and I call it like a sex is bad theology.
Yeah.
So the first is he created a point system. He gamified women. And so he assigned a point system for their sexuality. If you were a virgin, this is the highest honor. You get 100 points. If you are a widow who is celibate after marriage, 60 points. And if you're a married woman, then 30 points. It's less that. So there's this because sex is bad. So if you're a virgin, you're up here.
Highest,
if you're a widow, well, you've abstained for like a long time. So you're here. And if you're married, it's like basically what he said is the only good thing about marriage is that it creates virgins.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that like,
wow.
That's
that
wild.
is wild. Yeah.
So there's that. He said to husbands, anyone who was too passionate a lover with his own wife is himself an adulterer.
Okay.
Here's another, this is the other big one is, so basically they banned sex on holy days. So Thursdays, that's the day of Christ's arrest. Can't have sex on Thursdays. Fridays, that's the day of his death. Can't have sex on Fridays.
Yeah.
Saturday, well, we want to honor Mary, the mother of God. You got the sex on that day. Sunday, well, we want to honor the saints. I don't know why it's not the resurrection, but it's the saints.
Yeah.
And so we can't have sex on Sunday. And then sometimes arbitrarily, some Wednesdays are out. So one theologian went through and calculated the church calendar and came up with there were 44 days a year that were permittable days for sex.
Fair game.
44 days a year.
Yeah, that's insane.
And so like what's the impact, right? Well, okay, now instead of viewing sex as this beautiful thing that God has given us to share with a husband or a wife, instead it's this horrible thing that we're meant to avoid. And so then, like you said, like all of a sudden, like is marriage the magic pill where all of a sudden, you take the blue pill and it's the Matrix and you're awoken to like, oh no, sex is a beautiful thing now and it's good.
Sudden,
No, I've spent 20, 30, 40, however many years hearing and believing that sex is bad and I need to avoid it at all costs. Now somehow I have to reconcile it as this good and beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And that's a hard pivot.
Yeah, it is hard. And yeah, and that was, in point one, we talked about the beauty of safety. And one of the things that sex is designed is to be that ultimate sense of sharing your whole self with someone else. And there's a beauty in safety. And oftentimes sex is used as a weapon in relationships or a way to control or a way to get or a way to validate or, all kinds of things and negotiation tools. And what happens is when we use sex in the wrong way, it actually has the opposite effect. It begins to diminish its value, diminish its design and role that it's meant to play in our lives. And I think that's the big thing is we need to talk about these things of like, what's it for? Unity, not using. And all.
Right.
One other thing on the cutting room floor is under romance is cultivated and not consumed. That was, we really didn't get into the different levels of intimacy. And so it's important to talk about the real need. And we all have these deep needs to be fully known and fully loved, right? Yeah. And there is an emotional intimacy is probably one of the hardest things, especially for men, but I think for everyone, to really get right, because we have a tendency to hide what's really underneath. You know, we have a tendency to pretend. And someone said, and dude, I'm still wrestling through this. I don't know if I believe this fully or not, but it just shocked me when said that. Someone said, "Hey, if you are 1% unknown, if you're 1% unknown, you're 100% not known."
Dang.
Yeah, it was like, that's a powerful. And I was thinking about, you know, like especially with relationships between a husband and wife. You know, I think it's so important to have transparency and honesty, but in some ways it's true. Anytime we hold back or we hide or we're ashamed of like the one thing in my life or that one, you know, if they knew that one thing,
They wouldn't accept me.
yeah, they wouldn't accept me. And so I wonder if, you know, like, and this, you have to cultivate this. You have to take up courage, and it has to be a safe place to be able to share, you know, all the things. And when you're like, man, I had this one experience and someone made fun of me for it, and I've carried that, you know, or whatever that thing is, and you let someone else in on that vulnerable part, that vulnerability, it's really, really hard. But oftentimes we don't create space for that emotional intimacy in our relationships, and it actually has an impact on our physical intimacy.
Oh, it has to.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because I don't I think this was a couple years ago. I don't remember all the details, but I bumped into this study that basically talked about the importance of safety in the workplace. And we're not talking about like OSHA,
Yeah.
you know, but like the safety of ideas and the safety of like, I can express a dissenting opinion, or I can toss out an idea of what we could do differently or something new without feeling like I'm going to get like shunned or shamed or, you know, pushed aside, or in the sense of a dissenting opinion, like, you know, now maybe I get blackballed and
Yeah.
whatever that is. So if that's important in the workplace,
How much more?
how much
Yeah.
more important is that in your marriage?
Yeah.
You know, because I'm not nearly as vulnerable in the workplace
Yeah.
as I am at home. You know, and I mean, in holistically, in every sense.
Yeah. And I think relationally, it's true for our relationships. So for oftentimes when I find I work with a lot of like young adult age people, and you know, and oftentimes what I find is that the reason why they're experiencing loneliness is because they haven't taken the risks of vulnerability with people. And I think that one thing that the digital age has done is made us hypersensitive to rejection. Like, so for me, for example, for me growing up, a normal part of a kid in my decade growing up in the late 80s, mid 80s as a like a young man coming of age, like we had dances.
Yeah.
And then a dance, you had to like walk up to someone face to face and ask them if they wanted to dance.
Yeah.
And there would be like and you would get rejection. You get rejected. Yeah. And they'd be like, nope, not going to do it, whatever. And it was just a part of like that coming of age thing. We don't have social systems right now that do that. And because of the digital age and mass humiliation, it's even worse. Because like for me, maybe like her 3 friends and my 3 friends knew it.
Right.
You know what I mean? That would be it. And then they would talk about it and be like, oh, she burned you, and it would be over in a week or 2.
Right. I was going to say a week later.
Yeah. A week later, it's done and it's over and you're past it. But now with our digital age, it's like humiliation just keeps going and going and going. And next thing you know, you could be a meme or you could be, and so it causes us to take less risks that help us handle rejection in a positive way.
Right.
And I don't know what to do about that. Like,
no, but
and it's affecting friendships, not just romantic relationships, but people getting connected in friendships and job opportunities, and of course, romantic relationships and everything. Is we just don't know how to deal with rejection.
Yeah. Well, I mean, two things come to mind for me. One is that if we are unwilling to put ourselves out there in the small things, like will you dance with me?
Totally. Yeah.
We'll never get
Man.
to the step of the big things.
Yeah.
Will you marry me? Well, like that's like a huge leap. It's such a leap from nothing to something that massive, or will you accept me with this vulnerability? Because I'm not even willing to be vulnerable enough to ask for a dance, So I mean, that's a huge problem. But then the second thing I think of is like how it erodes human connection, because I think it's well documented that people connect better with our weaknesses than with our strengths. And when we are vulnerable with someone, overwhelmingly, the response is empathy.
Yeah.
I have a situation. I've been there. Like that's a really powerful way that we can connect with one another. But because we've not taken those risks, we, one, don't connect, but two, we're terrified of it because we overthink all the possible negative outcomes of sharing that thing.
Yeah.
And so there's just so many barriers to actually being connected.
Totally. Yeah, it's harder and harder, but there is that emotional intimacy is there. And like, just to get spiritual, because we are a Christian, like we're church.
Really?
But I think that's true for our relationship with God too. And I think this is like this is why rhythms and habits of repentance are so important. Even in the small things, to open us up to shortcomings and failures and pain points with God, And I think we are. There's just not a normal rhythms and habits of that in our lives, And I think the more we're able to open up with one another, and the more that we're able to share vulnerable parts of ourselves with God, the actual more connected we'll be to other humans. Yeah. In empathy, and the less lonely we'll be, and the less stuck we'll feel in our own interior lives. And man, a lot of marriages that struggle with emotional connection is usually because one of the people have something deep that they're hiding. Childhood abuse, something that's going on, and it's and it spills out, it triggers in weird ways, and it's because they're unwilling to open that part of their lives up to the other person and actually create empathy.
Yeah. I mean, I'll see it even just in our marriage with Laura and I, like, sometimes we'll try to insulate the other one from what we're experiencing. Like you're having a hard enough time right now, so I'm not going to share what my thing is, because I don't want to pile on to your, hard thing. And what inevitably happens is we get in a fight, or I get triggered by something she did that is like either tangentially related or not related at all.
Yeah.
And now we're in this fight because I just didn't say, okay, here's what's really going on, and I'm struggling with this, or I'm frustrated with this, and it's starting to spill into these other conversations, and I'm sorry. And because if I share that, there's empathy, and like we care for one another.
Yeah.
If I don't share that, there's frustration, there's anger, there's pain, and we never actually get to the real source.
Yeah.
And so,
and I think men in particularly don't want to feel weak.
No.
We want to feel strong. And the funny thing is nothing changes.
No.
Like
you still felt that.
Yeah, you're feeling what you're feeling.
Right.
You're experiencing what you're experiencing. And so, and it takes a lot of courage, man, to be honest about what's going on. And I have to, man, I have that thing in me. My dad was like, you don't show your emotions. You just bottle it in. That was how we grew up.
Here's the rug.
Here's the rug. And crying was, bad and whatever. And, which one, I remember the first time seeing my dad cry, I thought the world was coming to an end.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? Like,
I've never seen my dad.
Like, really? Yeah,
Not
dude,
once.
it freaked me out. I've only seen him cry once. It freaked me out. So I struggle with the stoicism that's there. But what's crazy is the moment I'm honest, even about little things, like, I told you the other day about with my son, with being like, hey, I'm anxious about this thing at work. I had this conversation that brought anxiety, and so I'm a little like not fully here. I'm sorry. Conversations like that with my wife bring so much empathy and support and connection. Right. And now she's not left to her own imagination about like,
why I'm mad
what's wrong? Why is David not talking? Did I do something wrong? You know what I mean? And
absolutely.
there's understanding and connection there. And so sharing our emotions and our experiences and even our expectations are huge. And to be honest, man, I think that's the big one is we don't share our expectations with one another. And the reason why is because I think we're actually kind of embarrassed of the things that we expect.
They're silly. They're just, sometimes they're ridiculous. Yeah. Sometimes they lean into gender stereotypes.
Totally.
Whatever. Like there's so many reasons that we do not want to say what we actually want.
But we get mad about when we don't get it.
Right. Yeah. But we never told you we wanted
exactly.
it.
Yeah. We all do that.
No, I think so. And, like I had the same experience growing up. And what I've finally have come to, and I've been trying to just impart this to my voice, but like, is that real strength is having the courage to be honest about your feelings and to work through them as opposed to bearing them, hiding them, avoiding them. And where that is really like, yes, it's most important truly for the self, but like the very next thing is those important relationships of people that we're, like just doing life with, part of our family, And so for me, I've had to like train myself, I used to have no feelings.
Yeah.
Now, I then went to like, you hurt my feeling, singular, I have a feeling. I think I'm up to a couple now, but I think the honest truth is like, I'm a deeply emotional person who has learned to mask those and mitigate those feelings. And the internal gymnastics that I have to do to get there are pretty crazy, but like real strength is just being honest. Like it takes strength to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
That it requires no strength to hide your weaknesses.
Yeah. Yeah. And man, I think the marriage in the marriage context and even the dating context, I think it's really important to allow yourself to be seen and known, and dating's designed to move from a place of vulnerability and insecurity to security.
Right.
You know what I mean? And a lot of modern day dating relationships they moved it more insecurity, and so, we have tons of friends who are like, they're dating and they don't know where their relationship's going. They're thinking about moving in with each other. And there's a ton of anxiety and insecurity in the relationship of what's going to happen, how they're going to get hurt, what's it, and
right.
I just think that safety and security can only be experienced when you're fully known and fully loved, when you're loved for who you really are, and there's no other way to get there.
Yeah.
Except
because when you're fully known and fully loved, you're also fully committed.
Yep. Totally.
Like
I'm not going anywhere.
Know if I'm fully known and fully loved, I have nothing to fear. Like there's nothing left.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's going to scare her off. There's nothing to run away from. Like, and it just transforms the relationship. But when we hold back, that's where we still have that, whether it's 1%, 10%, whatever that is, that there is that insecurity because I'm not fully known. I might be fully loved.
Yeah.
But
what's the phrase I was thinking about is the skeletons in the closet.
Yeah.
I always thought that's such a weird, like,
Halloween. I always think of Halloween.
I think of like, do you got dead people in your, like,
people.
You got stuff going on if you have a skeleton in your closet. Yeah, that's there. So
nice.
That's good.
All right, let's do just for funsies.
Just for funsies.
Here's the drop.
Okay.
Just for funsies.
All right. So you said in the sermon that all guys somehow get pulled into Hallmark, like a Hallmark movie or whatever. So I thought a good conversation would be, what's your favorite rom-com?
Rom-com.
Rom-com.
So I'm older. And man, dude, I don't think anything beats When Harry Met Sally.
Okay.
So-
I've seen it.
Yeah, you're probably still a little too young. Like I'm probably on the cusp of.
Yeah.
Like
I was going to say
I was a
that
young.
that
I
seems
was like
my
a young
parents
person. Yeah, when
would be
that
into that.
first came out.
Okay.
But that was like the classic rom-com. I mean, that was like it was funny and romantic, and it has all the elements in it. And then I think the next thing would be The Notebook.
Okay.
Like that.
Notebook.
Yeah, that was.
I literally just heard Courtney laugh in the other room. That's awesome.
What was she laughing at?
I think The Notebook.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah.
okay. Full disclosure, I kind of did this to roast you a little bit because I don't watch rom-coms. I've never been pulled into a Hallmark movie. I walk into the room. My wife loves Hallmark.
Yeah.
Although she says she likes it less lately. I don't know. We'll have to unpack that another time. But she is watching these movies, especially at Christmas time. And I walk in, I look at it for 2 seconds. I'm like, oh, he is, into her.
The storyline.
There's a misunderstanding that's going to happen. They're going to separate, but then at the end they get together. And
How do
I'm
you
just
know that,
like,
though?
Because it's the same.
But you had to have seen it.
No, actually,
You've seen one.
No,
You've
because I've
seen
heard
one.
enough.
Come on.
Lauren will come to my defense. I've never sat through a Hallmark movie start to finish.
By your wife.
Yes.
That you've never seen a whole
in fact,
Hallmark movie.
So the first 10 years of our marriage, I think I saw, I don't know if this counts, and it's a dumb, like Wimbledon was, I think, a rom-com, like a tennis rom-com. So I'm shocked that you're giving me this look like you've never heard of it.
Never heard of it.
It's a tennis rom-com. You probably should watch it. You like rom-coms. And then he's just not that into you.
I remember that. I didn't see that one, but I remember that one,
but it's literally
Did you see
like
the Titanic?
I did see that.
It's not a rom-com, but it's a romantic.
I was in high school and I was weak.
Okay.
I had a girlfriend who, and
so the male stereotypes are coming out right now. I see this.
Well, I just can't help it. Like, so I think here's the thing.
You're the reason why guys can't share their feelings.
Yep, that's it. Honestly, I think it's great for you. Like, I have no beef with it, but I have no interest.
Guy. Yeah, I'm a sensitive guy.
I have no interest. So like what Lauren and I we have an arrangement in our marriage.
Yep.
I don't have to watch chick flicks is how I've couched it.
Chick flicks.
And she does not watch sports.
And you're good. Yeah.
And so that's like our time apart. She's always welcome to watch the Dodgers beat the Rockies or the whatever. She's always, I know, I can't resist. She's always welcome to watch with me. She never accepts. And it's the same as she would love for me. But I'm not interested.
Yeah.
And so the real truth though is, I just don't care for it. I think it's great that you do, but it's kind of fun to roast you a little.
I'll take it. I knew it was coming. And by the way, I didn't say all guys. I just said some guys get caught in.
Get the tape, Courtney. Get the tape and drop it right here.
Yeah.
And even as a guy, I'm embarrassed to say, anytime one comes on, I get sucked into it, right? It's the same story. Like
all guys.
Oh, I might have said guys walk in. I don't think all guys. I know there's tons of guys that don't love that.
I can't get into it. But
yeah.
Anyways, that's just for funsies. Okay, we hit a lot of the things I wanted to talk about in this third segment. I had one left though.
Okay.
So you said the desire for romance is to desire something of God. And so I think this is like it's kind of, it ties in a little bit to like the sex is bad and, those kinds of things, but it's very counter to the cultural narratives and certainly the Christian cultural narrative on romance. And so, and it kind of ties into the whole, like, God is not prude, all that stuff. But this is kind of what I wrote this down because this is how I interpreted it. And I just want to see if that's, what you're thinking or if there's any nuance I'm missing or anything. But I said, so sex and romance are not just about satisfaction. They are designed to point us towards something greater, the intimacy, vulnerability, and self-giving love that mirrors the love of God. That's kind of what I pulled from what you said. I don't know if that's what you were going or.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, man. Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. Even to be, I'd even take it a little further.
Yeah.
And say it it's not just a reflection or a mirror or something that points to you. It's actually drinking deeply of God. Like a covenant marriage is not just the union of two people coming together. It's God's present in that union. And and I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. I'll get weird, but
I'm okay with
man,
it.
I think even in like physical sex, like there's an emotional, there's a spiritual, there's a physical, and there's even something of God that's there.
I mean, I've likened it to a picture of the Trinity.
Yeah,
in some
totally.
way. You know, there's this union of, you know, the distinct persons of God in one, and there's and literally the scriptures say, you know, that the two become one.
Two become one flesh. And if we really are temples of the Holy Spirit, then that means God's involved. Every good and perfect gift, we translate it comes from God, but it's like is of God. You know, it's like this is of God. This is God's way that we get to experience Him and
it's not just
Him.
something He gives us, like He's the giver, but it's like the essence of God.
Yeah,
almost.
He's there, and not trying to be in like a weird way, because God is separate and holy.
Sure.
But I really, really believe that our physical intimacy would be enhanced if we recognized in some way, shape, or form the presence and the goodness of God in it. Like, you know, and for most, it'd be like thinking about baseball or something, you know what I mean? Like, and it goes back to severance, right? We have a spiritual life and a
those
sexual
are very
life, and those
distinct.
are very distinct.
Like the idea of involving God in your sex life
it's
not foreign. Is like doesn't even cover it.
Right.
It's alien.
Yeah.
You know, it's like from another world. It is so,
and that's a tragedy.
Unthinkable.
It's a tragedy for anything. But especially something that is so explicitly image bearing.
Yeah.
You know, it's at the opening story of scriptures that Adam and Eve were together. And that means slept together. You know what I mean? They had sex. And in that, it was very good. There was somehow this image bearingness of God that was there in that. And yeah, we just need to bring God in there. We have a couple who, an old couple, they're like in their 70s, and they'd mentored Tara and I for a while. And we were planting a church. We love them to death. But they would always talk to us about their prayer life during sex. And it would make Tara and I so uncomfortable. Like the way they would just like talk about it. And, you know, and we'd never practiced that. But it was always so intriguing to me of how unashamed they brought God into their sex life as a married couple. And I just, man, I thought, wow, that's like next level spirituality.
I was just gonna say next level. I can't wrap my head around it. I don't know how to get there. I don't even know if I want to get there, but I probably do. But it seems so crazy.
It seems crazy
that it's like I don't want to get there. That's first thought.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. So it's just like, man, fully embracing the beauty of this is a part of God's creation.
Yeah, romance, man. Yeah. Like being seen and known and connected and emotionally, intellectually, physically, and spiritually one. You know, is a cool thing, man. And it's there's an aspect of connecting with God in it that He enjoys. You know, and so trying to figure out how to align our lives in that part of our lives there.
It's good, but it's weird.
And here's what I hope this does for singles.
Yeah.
Is that there's pleasure and intimacy that is waiting for you in your relationship with God. Like if that's true of the physical intimacy, there's something of God in it. Then there's something about intimacy with God that is not the same. And I'm not trying to make it the same or I don't want to cheapen that desire. But in your waiting or your chasteness, whatever that is, there's still deep pleasures to drink from of God.
Yeah.
Like, and I just wonder if sometimes a lot of singles are waiting for something else, and instead of trying to deepen their connection, intimacy with God. And I don't,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to cheapen the physical aspect of it, because
No.
there is something unique and different about that I don't want to cheapen. But I also think there's more for people.
Well, and the church is as guilty as any person or institution in like turning marriage into an idol.
Totally. Yeah.
Like it's
And it's
like
not.
get
Yeah.
baptized, get married is like the next
Yeah.
important thing. It seems like, in some circles, and it is so far from that. I think we have almost made it so that singleness is a tragedy.
Yeah.
How sad for you.
It's so sad,
and
man.
and
Yeah.
it's like literally the opposite of the scriptures.
Yep.
Like I wouldn't go so far as Jerome,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Or
like,
even Paul talking to the, and he's just like, but I think the point is there's probably more fulfillment waiting for us than just waiting for the Mr. Right or Mrs. Right,
Right.
like to come along in our
Right.
lives. And so,
Well, and if Jesus is the perfect expression
Human, yeah.
of humanity,
and he was
and
single.
he was single, it stands to reason that marriage is not a requirement to fully express what it is to be human.
Yeah.
And yet we've turned it into something that makes it seem like it is.
And loneliness is not just a singleness issue.
No.
There's been seasons in Tara and I's marriage where we both felt more alone together than when we were single, because we've had difficult seasons that we've had to work through, and we felt very lonely and isolated, and all of those things. And so marriage is not the answer to loneliness.
It goes back to like the beginning of the sermon. You were joking about, there's people who are single and want to be married, but there's people who are married and want to be single.
Yeah.
Like some people feel trapped in their marriage.
Totally. Yeah.
And we don't really talk about that. We just put
they're
marriage
married,
at
they're
this
good.
level.
It's all, they did the thing.
And because most people who are struggling in their marriage are silently suffering.
Yeah.
And that's equally tragic.
Equally as tragic.
Yeah. It's good. All right. I think we're going to have a drop for this.
Okay.
So we leave some space, but it's time for David's low-key obsession.
Bro, I am obsessed with I Know a Name.
Oh, the song.
Dude.
Yeah.
I pump it in my car, and so when I was in St. Louis, it's an urban context, and man, the black population, African American population is, it's like 50% African American, 50% white in St. Louis. And so, man, I miss me some gospel, black, church worship. And for whatever reason, that I Know a Name has that
just taps into that a little bit.
It taps into that a little bit for me. And it's like every time we sing it at church, when I'm singing in my car, I miss my black friends. And I miss when I used to they used to have me preach, and they would set up at the pulpit an ice cold bottle of water and a preaching rag. Right? The preaching rag, so when you sweat, you can wipe while you're preaching, you know what I mean? You just go to town. And
I've never received a preaching rag.
Dude, there's nothing like being in a place where so I'm just obsessed with the song, and it somewhere it speaks into my my multi-ethnic vision for the church, man. And I know we live in white Littleton.
We do.
It's hard to do that, but I do have something deep about the beauty of multi-ethnicity and how it declares and displays the gospel. And so even singing that song brings in an element of cultural expression in our church that I really appreciate. I just really appreciate that. And
that's interesting, because I love the song. And it speaks to me, but I've never thought of it in terms of multicultural,
a black,
no, not at all. But it's funny. I joke around, I am a good chunk of the diversity on our staff, and I'm half white. Most people like to argue with me that I'm not, but I actually am half Mexican.
Yep.
And so That's like the big joke. Like I bring the diversity. It's me and Julie.
Yeah, you and Julie
Julie's
hold
got a
down
little
the
more than me, but
ethnicity,
and so it is. I've never. So I grew up in LA. I'm mixed race. In some, but in a weird way that nobody sees it. So it's been an interesting dynamic in and of itself. But I just have always gravitated towards environments that
multi-ethnic.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it speaks to who I am, but it also just like I do think there's a picture of like what the church really is in eternity.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
So that's cool. I hadn't thought of it that way.
But I just hear it, and I know, I know it's a small thing, but every time we sing it, man, I just get this, Revelation 7, 9, and 10 is, it says, and a multitude from every tribe, tongue, and nation, ethne, like multiple ethnicities gather around the throne room and praise. And I just, I'm obsessed with that vision of the church.
Yeah, no, I love it. That's awesome. All right, time to wrap things up, put a bow on this with real life. Like, how do we do this? Romance in real life.
Yeah, man, cultivate, don't consume. I think, romance takes work. And so whether you're in a dating relationship or let me break this down for each category. Singles. The best thing that you can do is, instead of waiting for Mr. Right or looking for Mr. Right, singleness is an incredible time to become the person that God is making you to be. And so intentionality on your own health, your own emotional health, spiritual health, like man, singleness is a season to pursue health. And whatever you're feeling is not going to be fixed by a person.
Right.
So if you're trying to fix something, man, that's a tall sign that this is actually God's gift and design for you to actually work on self a little bit.
That,
and that could look like counseling, that can look like community, that can look like all different kinds of things that that's available to us, Divine Health. Now, dating couples, I think the biggest thing that they can realize is not moving ahead of their commitments. So, move slow, like date towards security, not insecurity. And that's really what I want to communicate to people. Like let your dating relationship move towards a more secure place. And if you're moving on in a relationship and you're feeling more and more insecure, it's probably not a healthy dating relationship. And the gift is that you can bail without any shame, without any, you know what I mean? Like, you're not disappointing anyone. It's like not too late. Like you can get out of it and wait.
So would you say in that, like the I don't know about the temptation, but like what often seems to happen is, as a general rule, we move physically faster than we move emotionally, spiritually,
intellectually.
Yeah.
Yep.
So like,
Totally.
So is the encouragement to like keep those things aligned?
Yeah. Explore the different aspects of intimacy that's there without allowing your body to dictate, desire. Pleasure is pleasure. It's pleasure for a reason, and certain things feel good, but it's short-term pleasure, right? Out of context will lead to long-term pain. And that's like really important for dating couples to keep in mind.
When you going back to that, like 4 verses from, when you view God as someone who wants sex to be a good gift for you, it's easier to say that makes sense.
Yeah.
As opposed to God's keeping something good from you.
Yeah.
Because he wants you to be this perfect person,
and we don't talk about the shame. We don't talk about the diminished dignity. We don't talk about the the broken pieces of us for rejection that happens after that level of intimacy, you know, the level of rejection that you experience once that thing doesn't work out or whatever. Like, so there's so many things that we don't talk about oftentimes. We just talk about liberating our bodies.
Right. Well, because the argument is in favor of that freedom.
Yeah, that freedom.
As opposed
and that's
to
the lie. It's not freedom. One is we cannot separate our mind, body, soul, and spirit. We can't. There were one. It's one thing. And so to just live as if your body's one aspect of you, but your soul or your spirit or your emotions are another aspect of you is full. It's silly, right? It's foolishness.
right. Well, we know it's not true. In so many other ways.
Totally.
But we ignore it in this way to justify the pleasure.
Yeah. And then this for marrieds, man, do the work. Talk about your day. Talk about the way you feel. Connect emotionally. Spend time connecting as two humans, and that's going to increase your physical intimacy. You know, like if you struggle with physical intimacy, man, try talking. You know,
well, that doesn't sound right.
Totally.
You know,
like just
how does that
spend
connect?
Time, ask questions, be curious, and familiarity breeds contempt. But here's the unique thing: is as humans, we're constantly evolving and changing. And so, my wife is a completely different person than she was 27 years ago when we met.
Right.
And so, life with her is, and her with me, is a constant opportunity to discover who the person is now. You know, and so we always try not to take for granted the fact that we change and we are changing. And so, and that requires connection. Like you have to talk, you have to connect, you have to ask questions, and not just for your spouse, but every relationship.
Well, right.
When you have a, I've left a few. I left a few meetings with some people, and like Tara and I have like left like dinner, whatever, and we're like, they did not ask us one question about us.
Yep, been there too.
And you're just like, that's so weird to me. Yeah. Like they couldn't care less about like
they wanted to talk about themselves.
Totally, and it just and that's always a red flag of unhealth. Like people are insecure, and man, we get it. Like.
Oh, I've been that person, I'm sure.
Probably, totally. Yeah. But it's the same thing with our marriage, man. Ask some questions, be curious, and intimacy will increase. And then take some risks. Share some vulnerabilities in marriage. Share past hurt and talk about how that might impact the way you respond. You know, why you get angry or why you get frustrated when certain things come up.
Right.
And
you're triggered.
Triggered.
Well, why?
Yeah, why? Yeah.
I saw you were triggered.
Totally, yeah.
I couldn't understand why, because the situation is like a 3, but it went to a 10.
Right. Like what? There's something behind that.
Like there is something behind that. Yeah, and that's like one of the things that I try to do is invite Lauren to share that. Like, because if I see that that's true, I just want to say, hey, like it seems like, and I sound really calm right now. I might not be calm in the moment, but why is this a 10?
Yeah,
like it's not a 10. Like, did I tap into something from your past, something from someone else, something, whatever? And those are when we recognize those things and we create space for it. Those are really impactful conversations.
It's usually an unspoken emotion.
Yeah,
you did this 2 days ago, and it hurt my feelings. Right. And then they carry it, and then something else happens and boom, it blows up.
Or something that has nothing to do with me.
Oh, yeah.
Where like I felt insecure because this thing happened. And then you said something that tapped into that.
Right.
And it instantly became massive. And I mean, I do this too. I don't want to say that Lauren does this.
I do it too.
We all do this because we're just triggered by these emotions and experiences. And so,
but it's because we don't share,
right?
It's because we're embarrassed, or we simply have not learned how to evaluate or examine our interior lives to what's going on the inside. So both of those things, like, man, just be more aware of your emotions and then learn how to share them. Be more aware of your expectations. Learn how to share them. Be more aware of your experiences. This is the big one for me and Tara, is that she'll ask me how my day is, and I'm like, it was all right.
It's fine.
And I won't tell her any details.
Yeah.
But then she'll hear me talk to my best buddy, Dan. I'll talk to him on the phone, and I'll start talking about my
this was
whole
rough,
day.
and this
You know what I
happened,
mean?
and,
Like
gosh, this
details and
conversation.
things. And she's just fuming, and I'm like, and then I'm just like, why did I do that?
Yeah.
Like why? Like, and that's because I'm lack of emotional connection. Lack of intimacy in that area.
No, and I would say like for us to be introspective in that way and share is good, but I would also say find invitational ways to ask those questions. Like cultivate a safe space to do that.
Totally.
So the way that we ask is really important. It's not like, what the heck, man, this was so small and you made it so big. Like what else is going on? Like that's not really inviting conversation, but to just be able to say, hey, like, I feel like this situation, like your reaction was bigger than I expected. Did I do something wrong? Like, is there something else going on? And that invites conversation in ways that can also be really helpful.
Totally.
And create a safe space. So now I feel like, I have an opportunity to share what's really going on.
Yeah.
So, yeah, cool. Well, hey, thank you. Thank you for
what an episode.
Hanging out with us. We got into some stuff.
Yeah, we did.
Woo! We should maybe put like what do we rate this? Is it PG-13? No, I'm kidding.
Spicy.
This is
rated
fire
spicy.
emoji.
Yeah.
No, so good. Good conversation. Appreciate it, David. As always. Guys, keep listening. Share the podcast, rate and review. But also, man, we keep asking people, like, send us a note. I haven't seen any comments really.
Okay.
You guys,
I get text messages. People text me.
Oh.
Yeah, so they think that's we need to drop it in.
Because you know why? They don't want everyone to know they're asking that question. It's a safe environment, guys.
It's a safe environment.
It's a safe place to make those comments. So, yeah. Thanks so much for joining us on the Centered Podcast. Next week, we're talking about...
Man, we're talking about the church.
Oh, man. My church isn't weird.
Yeah, no. Dude, I was thinking about doing that as the opening. That's so funny that you did that. We're going to talk about the church. We're going to talk about what it is. Man, there's some really beautiful images about what the church is. We're going to talk about why it's hard.
Yeah.
Some of the barriers to the church. Talk a little bit about church hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people. I've been hurt by the church. I know a lot of people who've been hurt, and so we're gonna try to see how far we get in the message. But talk just a little bit about what the church is designed to be and why it's so hard. Yeah. So stay tuned for next week's 4-hour episode. I'm just kidding. There's a lot there. There's a ton there, and we definitely want to get into it. And so be a part of the conversation by commenting. Let us know what you're thinking, what questions you have. Appreciate you guys. Have a good week. See you later.
Thanks for listening to Centered. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with a friend. You can listen to Centered on your favorite podcast platform or watch on YouTube. To learn more about Mosaic or connect further, visit us online at welcometomosaic.com. See you next week.